making 9 to 5 for you. And since COVID, many people have been working at home. And as we know, it's not without its challenges, especially for people that have pets and kids that tend to interrupt your day. So my name's Shea McQuaid. I'm the moderator for the session, and I'm going to be asking the questions of our panelists. I'm joined by Selma Burney. Selma handles all of our digital communications and back-end tech. And is becoming a bit of a Zoom expert. And Navita Dahl also supports the series. You may recall that the session theme for this year is Be Brave. And I said at one of the other sessions, little did I know how brave we would need to be in light of COVID and all the things that are happening with that. But actually, where I got the idea from is I was reading an article in Magnolia Journal. And the lady who owns Darling Magazine had talked about how she has groups get together. And one of the things she looks to focus on is allowing people to become vulnerable. Her perspective is that if you're struggling with something, odds are other people are struggling with it as well. So one of the things I'm going to ask all our panelists is to share something that they've done that was brave, and hopefully you'll get some kind of thoughts, ideas, and insights. I think the idea is if we're all willing to share and tell our stories, we can become much stronger collectively as a group. So I seem to be echoing. Anybody else hear that, or just me?
It's no? Because I think of other people, everyone else is on, it's coming through probably someone else's. I'll mute my.
Yeah, I started muting mine as well. That should help.
Okay. So maybe if everybody can just mute and then unmute as we go so that we're not getting the dreaded echo. And speaking of courage, this session was thus started by Justin Policarpio, who at 24 years young believed in women and women entrepreneurs. Justin unfortunately passed away with cancer at the young age of 30. In honor of him, we keep the series going, and thank you very much to our very generous sponsors who allow us to do that. Pre-COVID, the session was at McMaster Innovation Park, which included a lunch, and we hope to get back to that once things open up again. So again, thank you to our gold sponsors. We have McMaster University Engineering and the W. Booth School of Engineering Practice and Technology, and Andrea Hemrich's joining us today, and she's going to introduce our speakers. We have the Hamilton Business Center, and we also have BBC. And for our silver sponsors, we have SP Partners, and Farah, one of our panelists, is with SP Partners as well. So with that, I'd now like to introduce Andrea Hemrich. She's part of the faculty of McMaster School of Engineering Practice and Technology. And she's here to tell you a little bit about our panelists who are going to help you make 9 to 5 work for you. Andrea?
Great, thanks. Thank you, Shelley. So yeah, we have 3 panelists, so I'm excited to introduce them today. Mario Zelaya is an entrepreneur and founder of Majestic Media. Working closely with Fortune 500 companies on digital marketing campaigns, technology development, and digital innovation, Majestic Media was then acquired by Lynx Equity. During that time, Mario was head of mergers and acquisitions at Lynx, managing director of Majestic Media, and founded both Bad Axe Throwing and the World Axe Throwing League, WATL. In 2018, Mario left Lynx Equity to focus exclusively on Bad Axe Throwing and WATL. Mario grew Bad Axe from 9 locations to nearly 40 locations in approximately 2 years, while obtaining exclusive rights to axe throwing events on ESPN through WATL. Jamie Shea has a focus on collaborative process improvement and centering business strategy around the needs of the client. She brings authenticity and curiosity to the boardroom. With a cross-country role that brings her to sales offices across the US, she has worked in some rather unorthodox places and spaces. Prior to her current role, Jamie worked in a variety of service and sales roles, driving improvement and growth during periods of immense change with her organizations. The other side of the life-work balance involves Jamie as a very proud auntie, an obsessive reader and collector of children's books, a lover of all things food, and godmother to twin Australian Shepherd puppies, who live in Texas. Farah Zafar is a human resources professional with over 15 years experience in both the legal and accounting industries. As Director of Human Resources at SB Partners, Burlington's award-winning regional full-service public accounting firm, Farah is an expert at cultivating teams that build and strengthen corporate culture. Developing strategies that promote long-term growth, Farah helps navigate the firm through human resources planning and compliance, talent acquisition, performance management, and professional development. In addition to dedicating her time to SB Partners in the community, Farah enjoys spending time with her husband and 3 active children. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I have to unmute. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For that great introduction. And thank you very much as well to our panelists for joining us. I tried to get kind of a diverse mix of panelists here. Mario's had kind of experience managing an international team. And Jamie, I know you've been a long-term virtual worker as well too, that does a fair amount of business travel as well. And as well too, Farah, I know that you have 3 young children, which I wanted to try to bring in that mix of the people. I know that's one of the things many people I've talked to during COVID, the challenge of trying to work at home full time while managing a household of children, and especially if your children are younger, and if you're also trying to do some homeschooling with them as well, it can be particularly challenging. So with that, I'm just going to start out and ask our panelists, what is something you did that was brave, and what it was that you learned from it? Mario, maybe we'll start with you.
I think there's a lot of motivation, because when you're innovating and you're creating a new concept, it's something that is untested waters. It's uncharted territory. Sorry, there's a bit of a weird.
There's a bit of a reverberation. Maybe Farah, can you mute while Mario's talking? I see you just did. I'm going to try to mute as well.
Thanks. Okay. Oh, actually, yeah, that sounds much better. I would say I think there's a lot of bravery in entrepreneurship in general, but you know, particularly when you're getting into a new industry that you know nothing about or may not even exist. I think is in a sense brave. It's difficult getting into an industry that is new and cutting edge. When I first started Majestic Media, there's this little device called the iPhone that only existed in the US. And, you know, back then everyone still had their, you know, flip phones, they had their Nokia phones. No one knew what to make of it. And I knew that the path was going to be building apps and building applications for these phones. So we were among the first iPhone app builders in Canada. So I drove over to Buffalo to buy the iPhone. I brought it into Canada, and then I had our development team working on that. Around the same time, there's this platform that was available only for university students called Facebook. And I saw that there's, you know, a lot of opportunity in this, you know, little thing called Facebook that's really popular in the US. And again, we focused on building apps for Facebook. And so we ultimately became what was known as the agency's agency. So every sort of marketing agency that existed in Canada, in some way, shape, or form, they all outsourced their work to us, because we're the only ones that knew how to build iPhone apps and Facebook apps. And that's when our business really started taking off. And then we started working directly with clients. The other thing is, you know, there's this sport that actually started in Toronto. No one ever really heard about it before, but it was called axe throwing. And I knew I could take, you know, this small concept of axe throwing, and I could turn it to be as big as bowling. And I knew I could make it a big international kind of phenomenon. And so initially I started the company called Bad Axe, and Bad Axe is the one that helped commercialize the sport. So once I started a Bad Axe, I started getting a lot of inquiries globally about people who wanted to start off their own facilities. And I saw that there was going to be this new wave and new trend of people wanting to start their facilities, but there was no set rules and there was no set regulations for the sport. So then that's when I developed the governing sport for the sport of axe throwing called the World Axe Throwing League. And after we were around not even a year, I got in contact with ESPN, and we signed an exclusive agreement where all of our major events, we have a Canadian Open, the US Open, and the World Championships all get aired on ESPN. So we have had a couple of airings on TSN as well, particularly for the Canadian Open. But I think with, bravery in doing something cutting edge, in doing something innovative, I mean, the rewards are there by being essentially the first mover. And so, I'm in effect almost two for, or I guess I should say 3 for 3 for high growth businesses. And, if you're looking to really have a business that goes from 0 to 100, just like that, I think innovation is a key way to essentially get there, to do something so cutting edge, so new, so unique, and to have the foresight to see what the potential could be. I think I would say probably just always challenging myself to do something new has probably been, I would say, the bravest thing I've done.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mario. Yeah, I think that it's obviously your background is very impressive on the growth thing. And I do think that's one of the things with entrepreneurs is typically you have to see something before the rest of the world sees it, or see the potential in something before the rest of the world sees it, and then have the courage go forward with it, even when there may be some naysayers that aren't exactly sure what you're doing and why it is that you're trying to do it. Jamie, how about you? What's one of your be brave stories, and what was kind of the learning or the takeaway that you got from it?
Yeah, I was thinking about this and trying to think about if I'm thinking about being brave and the act of being brave. And for me, it was more the ongoing act of being vulnerable. And I would say that's both in personal and professional life. I started with the company that I'm currently at about 5 years ago. And when I originally started in my industry, I was very young, often the youngest person in the boardroom, and often the only female. And so I had learned to behave in a very specific way. And so when I started with the company that I'm at, my manager said, there's something different about you. This isn't the person who I met. This isn't the person who, I interviewed, and so on. And he really encouraged me to be myself, talk about what was scaring me, talk about what was embarrassing or that sort of thing. And through series of events, I just kind of let go at work and started very openly admitting mistakes and sharing who I was and that sort of thing. And it, I think, Mario, to your point, one of the unintended consequences was when you're not afraid of looking silly, you're more willing to take risks, and you're more willing to ask for what you want. So I found, in those meetings, I became far less afraid of saying something and being embarrassed for it, or really even just less embarrassed about somebody saying no, which makes a huge difference in your conversations. But a very, very unintended and unexpected consequence was I found the people around me started becoming far more vulnerable as well. And they started sharing a lot more with me, and they were willing to look silly. They were willing to express ideas that they might have held in before. And so I think first, as part of a team, that really helped propel our team forward a lot. And then as a manager as well, I mean, my people come to me, or my manager's direct reports come to me and will share stuff with me. And it helps me connect with people, obviously on a very personal level, helps them feel like they can be their true selves at work. But it's incredible how it helps them build relationships and gets our team to move forward. So I think it doesn't feel brave, but if you'd asked me to do it like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the courage to do it. So I think that's how bravery is showing up for me lately.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, it's kind of interesting you were saying like willing to be embarrassed or act silly. And just, again, Mario, you talked about innovation. And I think, there's a couple of things. I always say innovation is a team sport. It's not one person that ever innovates anything, right? It's always a combination of ideas that kind of come together and bubble up to create something. But also, too, part of innovation is that, you're going to throw a lot of spaghetti on the wall that isn't going to stick. There's going to be a lot of ideas that aren't great and that don't really work. But because of those, again, it's part of the process that gets you to that real kind of innovation that happens at the end of it. Absolutely. And interestingly, I think Jamie before, and I was saying research around leadership. And one of the things that people tend to value about leaders is when they are willing to be vulnerable. It shows that they care a little more. It shows that they're human. And I think that's something that most people embrace. Absolutely. Farah, how about you? Something brave to share?
I was like, I'll take myself off mute.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I don't know that I've been so brave, but I think it really ties back to bravery is really tying into doing new things, right? And just trying new things. And so for me, since I was a teenager, I've always worked in law firms, and that's kind of all I've known, and just, the ins and outs and terminology and just how a law firm works. And then a few years ago, I decided to move to the accounting industry and just kind of leave that downtown life. And that was more so really for, the benefit of my family as I did have young kids, and just kind of trying a new industry and, kind of starting from scratch really. At the end of the day, I know it's professional services still, but it's really kind of, just trying like a new position and really leaving your comfort zone. And so.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Absolutely. I know there's been quite a bit of talk about change as well, too, as part of this whole discussion. And I know with COVID, we've all had to embrace change, whether we wanted to or not. So I think the more part of being brave is continually stretching yourself, right, and your capabilities and looking at new challenges and moving forward with those. So I guess I kind of got some questions here that I'm going to ask for those of you who are attending the session here. If you do have any questions that you would like to ask any of the panelists, you can type them into your chat box, and we'll do our best to get to those either as part of the session or as we move to the end of the session. But I think one of the things is if I can ask each of you a little bit about like, what is your kind of work at home style? Because I think that, one of the things is there a style that works? Some people tend to kind of hunker down and just work through and get things done. Other people tend to kind of want to take, different breaks and go and do different kinds of things. Like, what's your style, and how do you find that you're able to stay focused when you're working home office? Anybody want to start with that one? Jamie, how about you?
Yeah, I can start. I think, so I've been working from home. Well, I've balanced working from home and traveling for work quite a bit for the past 5 years. And so my work from home style has become very structured. So, I'm not that person who works at my kitchen table. I have when I bought my house, I bought it with an office in mind. I have a desk. I get dressed every single morning in work clothes. People come visit and say, like, do you have an appointment you're going to? And I think that that's also reflected in my schedule. So my calendar throughout my workday is pretty regimented. And sometimes that's even just working sessions throughout the day, booking an hour of specific work time. It doesn't always go that way because that the nature of work is also that sometimes that just gets derailed. But I find it really helps put me in the mindset of working. Mm-hmm. And I find without having that sort of, what's the word? Like recreation of an office format, for me, I'm far less productive. Mm-hmm. That said, I also am able to translate that into, so this week, for example, I'm lucky enough that my parents have a cottage and they have internet there, so I can go work from there for the latter half of the week. And so because I structure things a little bit more, I can kind of like pick my work up and move it to another space, which has also fared well when I'm stuck in an airport for 12 hours because it gives me that very regimented workday. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the things I've heard a lot of people say that do business travel, and being one of my previous roles, I did a lot of business travel, and yeah, you've got to learn how to work at airports if you don't want to come back and be completely overwhelmed with your workload. Mario, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working from home, I would say almost my whole career. I think I'm at 11 or 12 years. I started doing it back when it was weird and it was and frowned upon, and it was no one did it. And so when I first started Majestic Media, I I actually used to work in the basement. I lived with my parents, and so I started it from my parents' basement. And most of my clients had no idea that I was running a multi-million-dollar operation from the basement of my parents' house. Could I have bought a house and could I have moved out? Sure, but I didn't. I wouldn't have had the infrastructure that I needed at home. Like I'll be the first to admit I have no idea how to cook. I do not clean. I go to the grocery store to keep my wife company when there's heavy stuff to lift. I'm more the mule than I am the planner at home. And in saying that, it kind of like, I do want to emphasize the importance of like having that other aspect. If I didn't have that support system, now through my wife, but it started with my parents, I wouldn't have been able to be as successful as I was today, because I could not be distracted by anything else other than work. I mean, early on, I was working close to, I think, 110 hours a week. When I first started the company, I mean, I was just a complete machine working 7 days a week. But I did it. I've always been very disciplined. When I first started, I used to work. I had one job in my whole career as an international banking at Scotiabank, and I used to have to wear a suit and a tie, and you go in with your attire, you work downtown. I kept that same mentality. I didn't wear the suit and the tie, but as soon as I got up in the morning, I showered, ate, like no later ever than 8 o'clock a.m. sharp am I behind my computer. So I have a very, very strict regimen. Before COVID, I used to wake up at about 6 o'clock. I'd work out from 6:30 till 7:30, shower, eat, but no matter what, 8 o'clock I'm behind my computer. When I was first starting out at home, I needed to get into the mental element of being at work. So I would actually wear collared shirts or a dress shirt, and I would wear jeans. The only thing I just wouldn't wear in the house were shoes, but otherwise I was there ready to work. Now post-COVID, and since I've been doing it for over a decade, I mean, I no longer have clients. I have customers, and I manage a company. So my dress attire is whatever T-shirt that I can grab first thing in the morning, I slip on, and whatever track pants that are there. So I'm fully comfortable. That's generally what I wear. But no matter what, even till this day, I always start at 8 o'clock, and I always finish no later than 5 p.m. But during that 8 to 5, I'm a complete machine. Like there's zero distractions. I take no personal calls. I rarely take breaks. When I'm eating my lunch, it's literally like, and I think Elon Musk described it best. He's like, I wish they could just inject food into me, because it's just such a waste of time. And that's how I
For
kind
those of us who are foodies, I'm just going on record, I don't want the injection.
See, for me, I wish I could just get the nutrients, just hook me up to an IV and just, keep me alive. So I can just keep typing and working. But, working from home, I am very, very strict and very adamant. I have essentially zero distractions, but it also allows me to make sure now, like, when I started working 100 hours per week in the beginning, that wasn't sustainable. And I'm now at an age where it's just, it's almost impossible. And so now it's like, how do I kind of accomplish the best of both worlds? I got 3 kids, I got a wife. I don't want to be working constantly. So I literally work 8 to 5, but during that 8 to 5, it has to be extremely hyper focused, so then it doesn't leak into the afternoons. And that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about work in the evenings when, we're out swimming, the kids are on the trampoline, or they're jumping on my head when they want to wrestle. It just means that, you know, I might not actually be behind my computer focused at work. And so I think, you know, working from home, you have to have that kind of regimen, depending on what your goals are. You know, if you know, some people are better thinkers in the morning. Some people are not morning people, so it takes them a longer time. So you kind of have to know who you are. I'm actually much better, more efficient in the mornings. As soon as it starts hitting 3-4 o'clock, I know my productivity starts tanking. So anything that involves, you know, if I have to review any sort of legal documents or anything that requires hyper focus, I make sure I do it only in the morning, and then in the afternoons it's more easier stuff. So there's a bit of like a mental process that you have to put yourself through, to getting ready, to where you should pace yourself for work, to the type of work that you should be doing, to setting some sort of limits to when your day should end, because you know, working these 80-90 hours, it's not sustainable, and you got to have a better balance. The other thing that I would encourage, I found myself becoming, if I could give it a percentage, I found myself becoming about maybe 25 to 30% more efficient when I started working out. And so early on, you know, I was very efficient, but I found myself making decisions that much quicker and being able to do things that much faster. I think it also has to do with the fact that, you know, when I'm working out, when I'm the most active, and, you know, it's more of a mental health thing than it is physical. And so I do it less for my physical body, but more for my mental state. And so, you know, now, you know, we're facing probably the biggest, I would say, challenge as a business owner, or even as a CEO, or even as managers as a whole, that we'll ever face in our entire lifetime. Like, I mean, that this is just crazy, some of the stuff that, you know, we have to go through, and what we're seeing today, and having these shutdowns. Like, no one in our generations has experienced, like, anyone that's alive today has never experienced anything like this.
Exactly.
So, you know, you have to find a way to mentally get yourself over that. And, you know, right now I'm at a point now where I don't really feel stress. It's just actionable stuff that needs to happen. Does it affect me personally? Absolutely. Like, I mean, I got a lot on the line. I at one point had a ginormous business that is now, you know, at risk. And I have many locations that are at risk. And so I think, you know, when you're working at home and you're managing yourself, I think being able to reduce stress in some way, shape, or form is a key element of that.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mario. A lot of good points there. I think that there's a lot of, I know, neuroscience research around being physically active, and how when we're physically active, our brains function much more better as well too, and it is a huge stress reducer. But I think there's a couple of things I heard you say there, kind of reiterating what you said, Jamie, around the structure piece, and really having that good structure for yourself, and the discipline and focus as well, I think, is a critical piece as well too. Farah, what's your thoughts on how you effectively manage working at home?
Really similar. At the end of the day, it was a big adjustment, kind of when COVID hit, really towards the end of March, just because I was so used to being in the office on a daily basis. But really kind of establishing that routine, and, you know, a dedicated space that I would go to, kind of thing, to kind of really bang out your day throughout the day. We had a lot of kind of daily calls with management as this all hit, so that kind of kept you on track for the day. I am guilty, though, of kind of, the lines are just so blurred right now, and so I feel like, as much as I try to kind of shut my laptop at the end of the day, I do end up kind of working in the evenings as well. I just feel like you're always on throughout this whole process, just because you don't, it's just new. It's a new thing for all of us, right? So, but really what's helped is just kind of having that routine and dedicated workspace, and kind of having boundaries with the kids as well. They were kind of really busy with their schooling and kind of their online schooling and maneuvering that. We're a little lucky that our kids are a little bit older, so they are pretty self-sufficient. So they would kind of, you know, manage their day kind of on their own, and we really would come together, you know, at lunchtime and then dinner time. But I think for me, the biggest challenge has been kind of turning off. I feel like it doesn't really happen, just really due to the nature of my job with HR. Is just so busy right now, and kind of ensuring that everyone is doing okay. And, you know, from a mental health perspective as well, but just kind of really, everyone's kind of learning to adjust to this new period. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Just kind of encouraging everyone to have that routine. That's really what's helped.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things that I always say is structure will actually set you free. I think there's a bit of a, you know, sometimes people think like structure is going to hem you in, and in reality, I think it frees you up to be much more kind of creative.
Efficient, yeah, true.
And efficient, absolutely. Farah, can I just get you to put your mute on? I'm getting that weird, sorry. I'm gonna have to keep asking that because I keep getting the weird echo, which I know it's kind of not exactly easy for a natural conversation. Next thing I want to ask is about kind of managing a team and motivating other people. I know each of you talked a little bit about staying motivated yourself and the ability to be motivated yourself, but how about kind of motivating a team virtually? I know one of the things, you know, that I've heard when I'm talking to clients is that, you know, well, I need my people here in order for me to be able to manage them. And I think that's a bit of a myth, but I'd like to kind of get your kind of perspective and input on that. Jamie, maybe let's start with you again on that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, this one's hard for me because I believe if you hire good people, that this is the kind of stuff that becomes much easier to handle. And, you know, sometimes we inherit people that perhaps we might not have chosen, but we get to work with them.
Is it get to work with them, Jamie, or have to work with them?
shifting mindset, right? And so I think about the team that I directly manage and then their people. And I think if I'm thinking specifically about this COVID period, which can absolutely parlay into other areas or ongoing work from home, I think there was a lot of patience at the beginning in terms of people really getting into their flow. You know, you have people who live in one-bedroom condos and cannot have a space that is separate to work from. You have people who have really young children that they can't self-regulate, and so, you know, you have little heads popping into conference calls and stuff like that. And I think the first phase for me anyways was telling people that's okay, that, you know, deal with that, do whatever you need to do to deal with that. And I found it relaxed people a lot, because no one was motivated. Nobody was, you know, everybody was trying to figure out where their head was at the beginning. And so there were a lot of check-ins, almost daily check-ins with every single person. But it wasn't, what are you working on? It was, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And now I feel like we've moved into a phase of being able to talk a little more about work. And I think having that period at the beginning really helped, because it allowed people the space they needed to fail a little bit, to get comfortable, to figure out what they needed personally as well as professionally. And so there's sort of this innate sense of motivation. I also say to them a lot, at the end of the day, the work doesn't go away. And so I think before all this, a lot of them wanted to work from home. And a lot of them would say, you know, when do we can we just work from home all the time? And I would say to them, I'm pretty insistent on being in the office for at least a portion of the week, because the roles that we're in are very relationship heavy. And now I have people saying to me, I can't wait to go back to the office. I can't wait to not be working from home. And I think that they realized pretty quickly that if you don't do your job, it's still there. And then you have to do twice as much work the next day. So I know that doesn't really answer the how do I motivate people, but I think it was sort of this evolutionary period of them figuring out how do they motivate themselves. And for me as a leader, that a lot of that was just encouraging, supporting, being that structure they needed, and then also providing support where I could. So, you know, did we have services internally that could take all that other stuff off of their plates? You know, as a team, we put together a ton of resources that could help with kids. So, you know, here are projects and free books and letter writing projects and so on and so forth. And so my approach was, how do we remove those things, the distractions or the barriers, and create a space where they can be focused on work. And then for me, the motivation piece feels the same as any other time.
Great, thank you, Jamie. I think that's very true. I mean, I think with COVID, it's been a bit of a unique situation, right? And then I think most of the world was probably pretty close to frozen for about 4 weeks. Everybody kind of adjusted to what was happening. Yeah, and I think part of I think being a good manager, a good leader with people as well too, is honoring that we're all human, right? And so we need to kind of work with our own stuff before we're able to, you know, work through our work stuff, right? But I also think that, you know, again, at the end of the day, and then maybe Mario, you can expand on this a little bit too. At the end of the day, the work's still there. So part of that as well too, I think having a structure in place so that you can kind of be monitoring the work that people are doing, or giving them the tools to monitor themselves, or making sure they're getting things done. Mario, do you want to talk a bit about that? I know we had said we had a 1:15 stop, but we'll probably try to go a couple minutes extra so we can at least kind of just get, you know, this question answered. Mario, do you want to tackle this next?
Yeah, so since we've been doing remote work for so long, a lot of the processes and a lot of what's happening today didn't really affect us from a corporate level. It was more just the shutdowns of the physical facilities that really affected us. So
yeah, and just to reiterate, Mario, like your whole team is virtual, like your management team across multiple countries, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So just to kind of give you context of how kind of virtual we are, I have an engineer that's worked with me. He's a developer. He's worked with me with the other company and this one probably for 6 or 7 years now. He lives in Poland. He used to live in Canada, moved to Poland, so he lives there, has a family there. I have someone else in Venezuela. I have a bunch of people all over the U.S. My managing director for Bad Axe, he actually, he said, you know what, I could work from anywhere. Can I just buy a trailer and travel around the U.S.? So he actually did travel around the U.S. and he lived there for the last year and a half.
So did Selma, did that for a year, so she could appreciate that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And so anyways, I mean, for us, it's like, as long as you have an internet connection, you're good. And that's the main thing. That's the main requirement for us. So to me, I always looked at talent being global and not necessarily local. And so I really believed a lot of what was echoed by Jamie, that the fact that, you know, the work's not going to go away. It's just, you know, like it's very easy to get, and especially with our companies and the infrastructures that we have set up, we generally hire people when we need them. We don't kind of create roles just to kind of make work. So it's very easy to get exposed when you're not doing work, especially when other people are relying on you. And so we have a lot of infrastructure in place that helps do that. And so from a high level, from a management standpoint, I mean, I think the immediate motivator is the fact that, you know, you get to work from home. I get to save you money. You no longer have to spend the dollars on your commute, on the gas, on, you know, buying food wherever it is you're working. I'm saving you an hour there, an hour back. So, you know, I'm giving you back 2 hours where you can do whatever it is you want. And so, you know, we have a lot of these great motivators that are already in place. But for us as a company, we implement tools. One of the main ones that so there's a couple of things that we have. We have a project management tool called Asana. Some of you may be familiar with it. There may be something like a Basecamp. There may be a Jira. Like there's just a bunch of different project management tools. But generally speaking, if something has to be actioned, it lives there. And so the idea is if, you know, one of my managers or myself gets struck by lightning, anyone can pick up a project where it left off, and they know exactly where things are along down that project path. And so project management tool is absolutely vital to managing the projects they're working on and the resources. The other one that we use is, it's called Time Doctor. And so Time Doctor is a system that we've used for, I think, close to 8 or 9 years, maybe even longer. But what it essentially does is it keeps track of your time, and it keeps track of your to-do list. So, when, let's say I'm using Time Doctor, I'm able to insert that, maybe I'm working on a legal contract for this location. Maybe I have to, apply for something here, or maybe we have to, hire a senior manager there. It keeps track of how much time I'm spending on each task, but at the same time, it will actually randomly take a screenshot of what's on the person's screen in that given point in time. And that's not to say it's some sort of spyware or anything like that. Literally, when you click it, you turn it off, it's off. So you can use your computer for whatever else you want. Just hit the break button. You're on break, you want to take a 15-minute break to, go on Facebook, you want to take a mental break from work, that's totally fine. Just, that's what the break button's for. So we've used that for quite some time. It's been very impactful, not only in keeping the remote staff honest to make sure that they're actually working, but it has actually helped me a lot for resource planning, because I can then go in and say, okay, why is my managing director spending so much time on payroll? And it's like, I don't want you doing that. Like, your time's too valuable to be overlooking that stuff. We'll promote this person over here. They'll be in charge of payroll. We'll have a dedicated person that will be a payroll clerk. And then, so I've made a ton of hires just based on the timesheets that I get from Time Doctor. It also alerts you if you're maybe not behind your computer and maybe you forgot to hit the break button. It's kind of like, hey, are you still there? And it kind of does like a knock button, a knock sound. So it makes sure that you are actually clocking hours for the work that is actually being done. The other thing that it also does is it gives you weekly reports. So the idea, and what I say to my guys is, I want like full focused hours. Like I don't want distracted hours. So when I say, in return, you will not work any weekends. You will not work overtime unless it's an emergency, which neither of us can control. But otherwise, I want you guys to have a life. And so, in return, I want you to do me a favor. Give me a 40-hour work week, like focused. And so, and the time doctor will tell them how many hours they've done in a week. And so, early on, guys would be like, hey, Mario, I was only able to hit 38. I'll make up for it on the weekends. It's like, no, I'm not like counting, little hours here or there. Like that's not the purpose of it. It's really more just to make sure that you're constantly focused and on top of all your tasks. So I think it's been a really efficient tool for us from a management standpoint, because one, it allows the people who are using the tool to actually keep track of all their tasks, because as soon as something's done, you hit a checkbox and it disappears. But if you don't hit the checkbox and it's right then and there, then you have your list and you see your list piling up, which then, could be worrisome for yourself, because it's kind of like, okay, I really need to, focus on this because this checklist is getting way too big. And then so it helps keep them focused, it keeps them honest, but it also helps me from a resource planning perspective. So that combined with the tools that we use for project management, I would say are probably the two main pieces of kind of lubricant on top of the Skypes, the Google Hangouts, and the chats that we have going on. But that's primarily the main thing. The other thing that I will add as a final piece is that, when you're in an office and you have a question for your coworker, you can go there, tap them in the shoulder, just be like, hey, can you help me out? I have a quick question. The concept is the same for us here. So during 8 to 5, if I call someone and their status appears as online, not as busy, because if you're on a call, that means you're busy and it's red and I won't disturb you. But if you're online and I call you, the expectation is you're going to pick up the call and we're going to hash out whatever needs to be hashed out. Generally speaking, chats are used primarily for time-sensitive stuff or emergency purposes only. So that's the other thing that we do, because otherwise chats are so distracting, you'll never be able to get anything done when you're getting pings left, right, and center, when it's something that could be sent in an email. And so I'm constantly training my guys to say, hey, does this need to be resolved right now? Because mentally, I might be knee-deep into something where my mental focus is on that I can't be jumping in and out of that, because then that's inefficient as well. So if they say, actually, yes, it is an emergency, okay, perfect, call me. So then, we have a phone call. But otherwise, if it's not, they know just to immediately send me an email, and then I'll get back to it when I get a chance to. Otherwise, anything that needs to be tasked or actioned, I leave it marked as unread in my inbox. So we have a general structure with how we work remotely, and that's kind of just been something that we've, in a way, perfected over the last kind of decade, and it seems to be pretty efficient.
Okay, Mario, I think you could have a side gig managing people virtually, doing training for managers post-COVID, right? On how to manage a virtual workforce. I'm sure this is going to be, you know, I think just kind of further to Farah was saying when we were offline that, you know, even though they can go back to work, probably people are only going to be going back half-time or part-time. So I think that the virtual is kind of here to stay, or a component of virtual going forward. And I think the one thing that you said, a couple of things that were kind of interesting, which I've heard before, is that, you know, every time we're interrupted and our brain has to recalibrate and we have to stop what we're doing and start doing something else, it takes an inordinate amount of time for our brain to recalibrate, and it takes a lot of energy that can be wasted. So it sounds like you've put a really good structure in place for that, that manages it. If it's urgent, you know, you do the chat thing or call, but otherwise it goes to email, so you're not getting that constant interruption. And then the other thing as well, too, I think this is kind of interesting, is it sounds like with the time doctor that you have and the to-do list and the weekly reports, really what you're kind of doing is training your team to self-reflect on what their productivity has been, so they can kind of self-correct and monitor their own kind of productivity and get a sense of what's working and what's not working for themselves and kind of adjust accordingly. And then my guess would be, if their self-reflection isn't working, do you kind of have some kind of conversations with them around it?
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, it's just like any other company. I mean, I think over the years, I've probably employed maybe over 500 or 600 people. But you know, throughout that process, you do catch people red-handed doing things that essentially warrant an immediate dismissal. And you know, our approach has always been, you know, we hire fast and we fire faster, and that's the only way we're able to essentially have an A-level team, because you know, interviews are tricky, because you know, you may like the person, you may think that person is awesome, they have the personality, they have, you know, the skills on paper, but you know, once they're in the team, you know, do they have the other it factors? Do they have the X factor of being able to actually get the work done, to actually you know, be a great manager? And that's a whole different thing. You know, are they able to even work from home? Can you trust them to work from home, or are they, you know, busy watching Netflix? And you know, we have seen that before, where it's kind of like, hey, you know, I'm not paying you all this money. Like to me, it's stealing. Like you know, you're essentially earning a salary so you can watch movies. Like that's not really what we're in business to be doing, and it's not sustainable for us. So it has happened several times where we do have inefficiencies, and it's not to say that you know, the first little thing, it's kind of like, you know, you're kind of out the door. It always starts off with a very stern conversation. And just setting the expectation. I mean, we typically do it very early upfront during the interview process, and when we onboard them, and we say, you know what, like, again, it's kind of that exchange. Like, I promise you will not work weekends for me. I promise you will not work evenings. I promise you will have a great, you know, work-life balance, the thing you've always been seeking for. But in return, you know, this is what I expect from you during those work hours.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's kind of that, if there's that, it's got to be an equitable, you know, I guess, value for both parties, right? Is you've got to, what you're giving, you've got to get something back in return for that as well. Farah, in HR, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience around, you know, encouraging and helping other managers manage people as well as doing it yourself. What is it that you find, you know, tends to work as far as kind of motivated and engaged?
So when this all hit, we were kind of right in the peak of busy season for our industry. And so the work was at such a high level that kind of making that adjustment to working from home was quite challenging for everyone. And so I feel like the one kind of positive, as much as we thought we were, you know, paperless, we really weren't. And so this kind of really forced us to get everything in place so that, you know, we're kind of really prepared for this situation. In terms of our managers, it's really having those daily cadence meetings, right? And kind of weekly, at the beginning, it was really daily cadence check-ins and checking in with your team. And, you know, in the accounting industry, you really have all those hourly reports. So you are kind of able to check to see that people are really, you know, doing what they say they are. But we really had to give everyone that flexibility, right? Because due to kind of family commitments and that sort of thing. Like, we understood the challenges that everyone was going through. So really giving everyone that flexibility, but then at the same time, as Jamie said, you got to really trust your people. And so we've never been one to really kind of look over, you know, someone's shoulder just to see what they're doing. As long as the work's getting done, then we're really not kind of forced to check in to see what you're doing. But just kind of having those clear expectations from the beginning, and, you know, understanding that really, if they need any help, that, like, you know, management is really there to assist them in any way. So.
Thank you very much. I think there's a lot of good points there. I think on just having that kind of structure in place with the, you know, weekly. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. It says that I'm muted, so I'm just double checking. So having those kind of weekly check-ins, daily check-ins, so you have that kind of structure in place as well too, which seems like it's kind of a reoccurring theme with this whole piece as well too, is that even though you are working virtually, you do need to really kind of keep those structures in place so that everybody's really clear about the expectations. So with that, we've kind of run over a little bit. I've had a couple of kind of people say that they had to check out because we are running a little bit over schedule. We do have our next Women Entrepreneurship session scheduled for September the 28th. So depending on what happens with COVID, that will be a virtual session, or it may be back at McMaster Innovation Park, depending on how things work out there. And just as we wrap it up, any kind of parting words of wisdom any of our panelists would like to share about working virtually, kind of what one of your biggest kind of life lessons have been with it? Jamie, do you want to start?
Yeah, being patient with myself. So be patient with yourself. Some days it just doesn't go the way you plan. So even if you have a very structured schedule, sometimes it just doesn't go well. And I don't have kids, but I know sometimes kids derail your day, and sometimes that's, you know, something else goes off the rails. So I think overall, just patience and open communication has helped, being really, really honest in communicating with my team as well as my manager what's going on in my day, and not being afraid to ask for help or time or space, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good one. I think we all have bad days, whether you're at the office or working at home, right? Sometimes, you know, even the best laid plans, and sometimes too, it's not even interruptions. I mean, I know myself too, is you just can't get as focused as you'd like to be, or you just can't kind of get that project going the way you'd like to, right? So having the wisdom to kind of let it go and move on to the next thing, right?
I would also add one more thing, is taking time off. I think I think especially currently, what I've heard from a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this, is we're not taking our vacation time because it feels like, what am I going to do with it? But the value of having a day or 2 days or a week to just take a break and have your home be just your home, and not have it be your office or your school or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's almost more important currently. So really, really encouraging people, and I'm going to take my own advice and book it when we get off the call.
Well, you did say you're doing the cottage thing, which even though you're still going to be doing some work, it's at least a bit of a change of pace. But I think that's a really kind of important piece, right? And I think especially during COVID, we know that mental health wise, it's really taking a toll on people. And I think that if we, we're kind of experienced, I guess, I don't know if less joy is a good word, right? But I think it's, you know, there's not that same freedom that we had, you know, pre-COVID, to just do whatever you want when you felt like doing it. So I think that we need to really craft having some joy in our life and figure out some other things that we can do within the parameters that we have that are going to fill our tanks again, so we can move on to the next thing. Mario, any kind of parting wisdom on anything that you would like to kind of say?
Yeah, I mean, I think transparency is a big kind of takeaway that I didn't get a chance to kind of talk about. And I'll just give a couple of quick examples. One of my staff in the HR department said, "Hey, Mario, I have a personal doctor's appointment, coming up. I can only do it during the day, no problem. Hey, I have to step away from my computer for like 2 hours. I have to do this." Like, and that type of stuff it's okay. And I don't think there's a manager out there, at least not any good or competent ones, that would ever say no to anything like that. I think everyone is understanding that, one, we're in a weird time right now. Two, people have families, they have kids, and you have to be kind of understanding of that. And three, it's just there's certain time restrictions that people have, and so you have to kind of work around whatever those time restrictions have. And so I think just being transparent about kind of what it is you're doing if you're not going to be behind your computer, because the expectation is, when you're working and you're working 8 to 5, I should be able to get a hold of you, and we should be able to have that conversation. If I can't get a hold of you and it's half a day's gone by, then it's because you're driving up to Muskoka and you didn't book the half day off. Then that then becomes a problem. So I think people just need to just be honestly transparent about it. Focus as best as you can. And you're right, everyone's got completely different working conditions. I'm fortunate to have a setup where I have my dedicated home office, even though sound carries. So I'm hearing Hulk Hogan body slam, some other wrestler downstairs, and I'm getting the play-by-play of what's happening. But I mean that's part of kind of the standard norm, and so you have to be able to kind of be flexible, work around it, being able to kind of drown out that noise so you can get as much done as possible. The thing too is like, I think people need to look at it as like, you have a great opportunity here, because if you have the opportunity to potentially not ever be able to have to commute to work again. And I mean, to me, that would be a huge deal for me to, save 2 hours in a day and X amount of dollars per year by not taking the 407, or, being stuck in traffic, or having to buy lunches every single day and be able to work from home. Like, if I worked for a company, I would work my butt off just to show them that, like, I'm actually much more efficient working from home. So I would never have to go back in the office unless there's some sort of like a major board meeting. But I think people really need to take kind of that mentality of like, this is kind of your time to shine, and show that, because when you ask people, typically it's like, where do you get the most work done? And people, when they were at an office, it used to be like, well, I would want to work from home, or maybe it's a coffee shop, whatever that is, here's your kind of chance to make that happen. So I think those are probably the last things.
Yeah, and I think I've got an expression that I always use is that, the sister to freedom is accountability. If you want to have freedom, you need to be accountable, and you've got to be accountable for getting kind of a certain amount of things done. And I think that, further to what you were saying, if you're enjoying working at home, then, you've got to show that you're accountable and responsible and get things done, right? Farah, any kind of parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share around working virtual?
It's really just having that understanding and flexibility that life happens, right? We're all in the same boat at the end of the day. So I think that really brings everyone that level of comfort that everyone's experiencing and going through the same challenges. And it's interesting to see that as much as people wanted to work from home, that they really are kind of anxious to get back to the office, and that human connection is really important for people. But I think just kind of having that understanding, as Jamie said, in terms of vacations, that's been kind of a challenge for people not wanting to take time, because really, where are you going to go? Like your backyard, right? But I think we've actually decided to kind of close the office on Friday, so people do have that time to really shut down. And we've given them an extended long weekend this upcoming weekend. We're closing on Thursday and Friday as well, so that people really kind of, we're forcing it upon them to kind of, combat their fatigue and really take that time for themselves. So
I think that's a really great idea. I've heard of other people doing a similar kind of thing as well too, with the kind of 3-day weekend, or 5-day, I guess it is, when you have your working days.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it is an important piece, because it's funny, I was just doing some kind of research and I was looking at it again, and they were saying about how stress and burnout, and what I think it costs, like, I don't know, $7 billion or something in North America. So It really is an important piece to take care of your well-being, physically and mentally both, right? So with that, I'd like to thank you very much, Farah, Jamie, Mario, for your insights today. I know it's been really helpful. We've gotten a lot of really kind of great information from it, and some tips and techniques that I know our listeners are going to find super helpful to manage their workday and manage their team's workday as well. And as I said, with your honor email list, you'll be getting updated when our session is going to be happening in September. And thank you again to all of our sponsors. And everybody, relax and enjoy the summer and take some vacation time. We'll see you in September.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.